She is an incredible author of a new memoir. I have really enjoyed just having a conversation with her, but she had some stuff that she had to overcome too. MG Barlow is here with us today. MG, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
I just love your story of resiliency and overcoming and just what a powerful person you are. You're just awesome. So
Thank
let's
you.
start at the very beginning of what makes you you. Where are you originally from? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a little town called Chelmsford, Massachusetts, which is just north of Boston.
Oh, you don't have any hint of a Boston accent. You must have stayed well away from that part of it.
I think there were some adults in my life who really worked it out of me, unfortunately, because I kind of like the Boston accent.
I've always thought it was cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, without too much detail, about what the challenges were, what the traumas were that you had to face that got you on the road that you're on now.
So as a child, my mother committed suicide. And to be honest with you, Amanda, growing up, I didn't know that I was facing the challenges that I faced. I think as children, we grin and bear it and get through it and stumble along. And especially in a family like mine, therapy wasn't something that we did. We just needed to pick up and move on. So it was more as an adult and reframing the experience through a parent's eyes, the caring parent that I tried to be to my boys, that I really understood what I was missing.
Wow. How old were you when she went?
My mother died when I was 7 years old.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
So what did you have to do as a kid to be able to pick up and carry on? I mean, I get the whole we don't talk about these things outside of our family mentality
Mm-hmm,
because that's exactly what it was when I was a kid growing up too.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think some of the coping strategies for me as a child were praying, believe it or not. I, my immediate family wasn't super religious in that we didn't go to church every Sunday, but my extended family and those around me were. I had an aunt who was a nun. She was wonderful. She wasn't the kind of nun that cracked your knuckles and that sort of thing that you probably maybe experienced or heard from other people. She was a deeply good person. And I spent a lot of time with her. And so praying was something that we was very common and usual in my family. We had religious little statues around the house and pictures and things like that. So I actually had this little deal with God growing up as a child. And I knew it was a terrible thing to lose my mother as a little girl. I knew that. And so I felt like I was keeping score with God and I felt like he owed me. And so I'd have these little conversations and say, can I get an ice cream somehow today, God, because I lost my, I know it was really silly, but I did do that.
Oh, that's
We
part of the
had,
bargaining stage.
yeah, we had a score to settle. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the standard stages that people go through when they deal with the massive trauma in their life, even if they don't realize they're experiencing trauma.
Mm.
I mean, this is the bargaining stage. Even though you're not bargaining to have that person returned to your life, you're still finding a way to be able to bargain to try to deal with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned that because one of the things that was I always had an aversion to was reading and understanding grief
Oh,
growing up, even into long into adulthood. Just a terrible aversion to any grief books or anything. I would buy them. I have several on my shelves even now, but to open up and read them, it just was like drinking dirty dishwater. But there's one grief book that really resonated with me and still does, and it's Hope Elderman's Motherless Daughters.
oh,
And she's very active even today in this whole movement. She created the movement. But that's one that I would totally recommend for anybody who's lost a mom at no matter what age.
yeah. I imagine it'd probably be helpful for people who've had to cut their mothers out of their life too. I mean, there's some
Maybe.
people whose
Yeah,
parents
maybe.
weren't very good to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's still a loss.
100%. I agree.
So, how difficult was it to kind of adapt to learning how to be a mom after you lost your mom so young?
I really thought, Amanda, that I would be a terrible mom when I was expecting. I was worried about it. I thought, can I even do this? Not knowing. I did have a stepmother for a short period of time. My father and her had a very rocky relationship, and so I didn't spend a lot of time living in with her family, but I did have a few years with her, and I think that offered some guidance. But even my relationship unwound with my stepmother. Um, so I worried about that, but I bought every book under the sun. So while I couldn't read about grief and grieving and all of that, I read voraciously when it came to being a good mom, what to expect when you're expecting, and all the Dr. Spock books, and you name it, I read it when it came to that. So I was completely on board to be a good mom. And what I learned was I absolutely had it in me. And I think that for the short time that my mom was around, she did pass on a lot of goodness. So,
Oh, what's
yeah.
one of your favorite memories with her?
Mm. Um, well, what comes to mind when I talk about goodness and her sort of passing that along, was must have been 5 years old. My favorite candy in the world were Reese's peanut butter cups. Now I still kind of like them, but I avoid them for obvious reasons. And we were in a five and dime store, maybe like maybe back then it was a Woolworths or something like that, a little five and dime store in downtown Louisville. And I only remember the part of this story from when I was caught, this little bandit in a store with her, and I unwrapped these candies and was eating them. And she looked at me and was just shocked. And she held my wrist, right? She took me by the wrist to the counter and gave me coins. Nowadays it would be dollars, but there were coins, to pay for this candy, and told me, I needed to pay for the candy. We don't just take things. And so, I did that obviously. And the shopkeeper was very kind and thankful, and little lesson learned there that I was able to remember when my son picked up on a Christmas ornament in a department store and it broke. But I took him to the countertop and said, no, we need, I picked up the broken pieces and we walked over and I gave him the money to pay. And it kind of reminded me of that little scene with my own mom. So, there were all these things that, at least I had her for the years I did. And she taught me that. So,
Wow. And how old are
and
your
many
kids now?
much more. My boys are out of the nest. They're 30 and 33 and doing
Oh
very
my
well.
goodness.
Mm,
Oh, any
yeah.
grandbabies yet?
One, yes, I have
Oh,
one who's a year and a half, and she's just a little sweetheart.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So my husband and I both became grandparents this year. Son
Oh,
and his wife had a baby on Mother's Day,
oh,
and my
yes.
husband's daughter just had her son 3 days ago on the 30th of
Oh,
November. So
oh, congratulations.
thank you.
Uh,
It's a completely different mindset for motherhood, though.
It is. It is. I'm still trying to navigate it. I feel like I can just be anything I want to my little granddaughter. I adore her, and I hope to make her proud of me, and show her some strength. And I started this little book for her, like I do. My sons don't even know that I've done this yet. And I think I ought to really give them these books at some point. But I have those blank journal books that you can get in any good store, with the beautiful, bound covers and images on them. And I've been writing to my sons since they were born, just a letter every now and then. And special occasions, or they learn a new word when they were little, or what have you. When my son got married, I wrote him a letter. He's never read it. And so I started a little book for her too, and sometimes I try to pass on a little wisdom if I have any wisdom, to give them. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
that is such a beautiful idea. This is going to be a gorgeous gift when you do give it to them.
yeah, I know. I got to give it to them at some point. Just never seems like the right time. And there are pages left. And I feel like the time to give them the books will be when they're full. So I can do that.
Giving them a full book is like giving them a full life.
Hmm.
They'll have a little bit of who you are on the inside, not just who they know you to be now.
Yeah.
That's that's beautiful. So what helped you once you figured out that what you had gone through was something called trauma? What
Yeah.
helped you to really process this and to move beyond it and overcome?
Just to recognize that that's what it was. I think I think grit is a really good thing, Amanda. I think we all need grit. I think my family has a lot of grit. Um, we really weren't, we really didn't try to mourn my mother's departure. No therapy. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about her. My aunts and uncles did, her sisters and brothers. I mean, they loved her and they brought her up every time I saw them, but not so much anyone else. And so there wasn't really this recognition that something that was a really big deal went down. And there was a lot of other stuff that happened because there's a lot that happens in the void, right? Of trauma, loss. It's not just the loss of the person, but it's all the stuff that happens that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And it's all messy because um, you don't really know. You can't sort of parse it all out and say, well, that wouldn't have happened or this did. But there's some obvious things, like a major change in a family because your dad remarries and then he doesn't get along with his new wife, etc. So I think as a child and as a young adult, I just bounced through it. I just tried to get through it. I didn't label it as trauma. In fact, doing so would have felt overindulgent. Even recently after my book came out, my sister, who's one of the most wonderful people on this earth and has so much strength and grit herself, but she even said to me, I, I, I never knew Ma's loss bothered you that much. It's like, how could it not? It was like we were just sort of, when I bought that book called Motherless Daughters, I felt indulgent just buying that book and reading about it. So I think just being able, I think being a parent helped me so much, Amanda, because I was able to think, wow, I'm trying to be such a good mom to these boys and be there in all these various ways. And this is what I missed, like having that one person who's 24/7, loves you, cares about where you are, who you're with, what you're eating, what you're wearing, did you do your homework? I mean, all those things that we do as parents. I think that's really where it started, is just recognizing that, yeah, that was a trauma that I went through. And just kind of being a little empathetic and letting, put aside a little bit of that grit to say, it's okay. It's okay to say that sucked, you know? And I really required more. And maybe that's why there are these parts of me that are broken right now, you know.
Wow. And I know at one point, just looking at the cover of your book, you ended up finding and renovating an old house. So it's a vintage house. What vintage?
So it was 1923.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, really sweet, a real sweet place.
mm,
Yeah, 1923 Gambrel farmhouse. And the this man who came in and did an inspection of it one time, he labeled it that way. And I said, oh, okay, I'm going with that. I love what he's calling this house. Yeah. I always thought of it
oh,
as a Gambrel Cape before that, but he said a Gambrel farmhouse. Mm.
wow. So I have a huge love of all things vintage. I'm turning off my background. I've got an old 1930s radio here. I've got a
Oh,
1947 dress here. My closet is
wow.
filled with 1940s dresses and
Oh,
suits. And oh, I love all of that stuff. Oh, this is like a dream for me. So now I'm going to live vicariously through you. Was the rebuilding of this house and the restoration, was this helpful for you to be able to kind of get out frustrations and angers and understand things about yourself?
Yeah. I think by that time in my life, well into when, what, let me think, it was 2005. So I was older than I can even count backwards. But I bought the house in like 2004. And so I was well into my obvious, single motherhood, adulthood by that time. Um, and I thought it was healed. I thought it was pretty much like as good as it would get. Okay. Um, but when I just fell in love with this house. It was a very bad time for me to buy a house. I had gone through a divorce. Not no divorce is great. My ex-husband is a good man, but it was hard. And I had moved with my sons into this condominium at first, and they were not used to that. We had been in a single family home before, and they wanted a single family home again. So we went house shopping. And um, by the way, I'd been divorced for like, I think 3 or 4 years by then, 4 years. And I had already gone through the breakup of the first man I had a serious relationship with after the divorce, and I was brokenhearted. And so it's just terrible time to buy. And I didn't have a lot of money, but I did have equity from that condo. And this house was it was so cute and wonderful, but it was broken down. And it just had so much charm and character shining through its broken parts. And it kind of felt like me in that way. And so I just immediately fell in love with it. It was the wrong thing to do. And if you ever have that feeling when you're with a realtor and you're not sure you should be buying, you should just run. Um, but anyway, so I get in there, and just there's so much, as I said, character and charm. It had like a cobblestone apron at the bottom of the driveway, although it was all wobbled. It had an iron fence around the outside of the yard. It was rusted. It had corners missing from the garage doors where my, chipmunks were running in and out. And it rained inside that house a couple times. I had a tsunami in the basement once. I mean, you name it. I had so many things go wrong. But I had been living there for a year, and this strange car pulled up the driveway. And from the passenger side, this woman looked up at me and said, "I'm 88 years old, and I used to live here when I was a little girl." So me being so in love with this house, I felt like something came back from its past to speak to me. And that day, Pauline Bailey gave me a tour of my home. And she took me, we first walked into the kitchen, and she said, "Oh, it looks the same." Well, of course it did, because it hadn't been updated in 100 years. Um, but she said, "Oh, and there's the cabinet where we kept our Bible. And that's how my father learned to speak English." Now, this Bible was in the kitchen. And I was wondering, how do you use a Bible to teach yourself to speak English? But he was from Holland, and he had built the house. And she showed me these china cabinets that he had built and how he had constructed them. And the floors were all this beautiful wooden log cabin design, wooden floors, and how they used to get on their hands and knees and scrub them and buff them. And the hidey hole in the floor that her father put, he was putting $50 bills in there to take her mother away. And then the room that he built for their grandparents to stay in when they lost their farm in the Depression, and the flagpole he put up when his kids went off to war. I mean, all these backstories. So after she left, that house was never the same. It was just loaded with artifacts. And it brought to life this whole meaning of a family, a full family that lived in one home together, that had stayed together the whole time and came and went. And it just made me reflect so much on what that must be like. And it made me want to take better care of that house and to be a steward for it. And it kind of just brought to life the fact that these houses that we live in, they're bigger than us, literally, but also in a more symbolic way. They're going to live much longer than we will, these homes, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be houses to many people. And so we have a role beyond the agreement that we have with a bank in preserving them as best we can for the people that are going to come down the road. We don't know who those people are going to be, but it sort of gave me this additional, I felt like another kind of steward. In addition to being a parent to my boys, it was more about, yeah, I got to preserve this house. It's bigger than me, it's bigger than us, and it's important to do that. So, and also it brought back so many memories of my own immigrant grandparents. I mean, here was an immigrant family. Now, I want to stop and say that Mr. Osterman, who had originally built the house, he immigrated from Friesland, Holland. His wife was from the USA. And of course, his children were born here. So, but my grandparents were from Portugal, from Madeira. And they had their own beautiful little house too. And they believed in the same type of caretaking that Mr. Osterman did. And there was a workbench in there, Amanda. It was no matter who you are, whether you like to work at workbenches or not, anyone would fall in love with the workbenches in this house. I mean, they were as big as like a twin bed, and this thick wood. And I used to do my potting at them. And so you could just tell that there was just so much care for the house itself. And so it kind of reminded me of my own grandparents and the care that they gave to their house and their yard. And I wanted to be like that, and I couldn't be like that the way that I currently was. So I had to just sort of make some more commitments beyond myself and some of the things that were important to me then.
Wow.
That's a long-winded answer.
But it ties in perfectly with your book.
Yeah, so, I mean, I have a lot to say about that house.
I love the title. I love the cover of your book. How did you come up with this cover?
I'm glad you like the cover. I just changed the cover. Actually, it's the same picture on the cover. The new cover is going to be the same picture, but just different colors and a little less stuff. I think a lot of people didn't get the cover, but I can tell you what it is. So some of it is some art that I found, like so there's a wonderful designer at the publisher who published my book, is a small press called Black Rose Writing. They're wonderful. They've been great. And they have a designer there called David King. He is, he gets all the credit for the cover, but he worked closely with me to do it. And so we found the girl like in some art that he shared with me, some pictures and so forth, and the cover. But the background in my story, in my childhood bedroom, I had chosen wallpaper that looked like a landscape. And when I did, my father said, or somebody at the wallpaper store said, no, that's only, dentist offices use that. And my father said, she can get whatever she wants. She's got to look at it. Okay. So it's from my childhood bedroom where there was a lot of sadness. So I'm wallpapering over in the cover that old bedroom wallpaper. But no one gets that. I mean, it's, so that's kind of the idea there. In the new cover, you can't see that old wallpaper. We took a lot out to make it less congested, and we changed the colors to add more pink.
Oh.
Anyway, but it's the same kind of thing with it's the girl with the T, and yeah.
Very cool. And it's called Home, My Story of House and Personal Restoration.
Yes.
Oh, and it's beautiful. It's all over the place, but my favorite shop, of course, is Amazon. So that's where mine's coming from. Yeah. Have you got a part of it that you would like to read for us?
So I can read a little section that there's a lot of little sections in this book that I love, but this is when I was a teenager and I had this wonderful opportunity to have a horse that I could ride. and she was also very therapeutic for me as a youngster, as a young person. I was pretty broken up at this point, but I would ride her, and so let's see. So I rode her into an open field and toward a bridge and stream running under it, just like in my wallpaper. We approached the bridge. Bonnie, my horse, pulled away. I hopped off and walked her over to it, letting her sniff the bridge. Thinking she might walk over it if I led her, she pulled away. I hoisted myself up onto her back and returned to the barn, feeling a bit disappointed we couldn't get to the fields on the other side of that bridge. The next several times I rode, we'd come back to that bridge. I'd slide down and try to lead her over. Come on, girl, it's okay. She'd pull away. I'd hoist myself back up onto her and return to the return to the barn, feeling that same regret. Then one day we approached the bridge. I got off, and as always, I nudged her reins as I stepped onto it. Come on, girl, you can do it, I said. To my delight, she walked right over the bridge without hesitation. And next time, and countless times to follow, I rode her over that bridge and into the grassy hills and fields on the other side. I rode back out to the road on the far end, finishing miles from where we first entered the trail. Bonnie taught me a lesson that day that took many years to absorb. Accomplishments happen in stages. It takes patience, but crossing our bridges is so worth it because in doing so, we get to see what's on the other side.
As soon as we were talking before we ever started recording today, you brought up the thing about you had a story about your horse. I knew right then I was going to go and buy your book. And I went to your website and I used that website, which is mgbarlow.com, to be able to go over to Amazon, to be able to grab the book. You have a couple of different options there for people, but I just fall in love with stories where horses are part of the recovery process. Yeah, horses and cats, my two favorite animals.
Yeah. Oh, cats are smart. They're so much smarter than they get credit for being.
Oh, yeah. And they are so clingy. Oh, my gosh. People say all the time, well, I don't want a cat because they're too independent. We have 6 cats. 5 of them will be in our laps at one time. I have to close my door or the cats will be all over in here. Yeah. They're funny animals.
They want to be near you.
Yes. So it is that time where I ask my most favorite question. It's the last question of the episode. But my most favorite question is always, what is one thing that you love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
Thank God it's not related to my physical appearance because we'd be in big trouble.
You're adorable.
So I would say this is so hard. It's really hard to say, but I have to say it's grit. And I know it's the same thing with sort of my nemesis too. But I do have a lot of strength. I don't know, there's that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But things that are a big deal to other people, and I'm sure you're like this too, Amanda, you've been through a lot. It's like, honey, you don't know the half of it. It's like, this is not something to cry over. I have a lot of strength in getting over things, and moving up and getting on with it now. I don't spend a lot of time, worrying too much. So I think that I would say is my strength. And I hope I always have it.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight-fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself.